We made this.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Pick a Disc. I am your host, Latham. This is the podcast that usually has someone come on to talk about an album they picked for whatever reason they want to. But today is a bit different, so forever expanding the premise of the podcast, because technically the podcast has a quite open premise, which the conversation that will unfold has me kind of expand on that a little bit, but basically someone else has picked the disc that me and a guest is going to talk about. So yeah, there's a third person involved. So the third person is Colin Jackson-Brown, who has been on here several times. He has picked Ciao by theStart. However, Colin is not actually on this podcast. He may cameo, but he's not actually involved in this discussion. Instead, it is me and my guest Mark Adams from a couple of weeks ago and the Prodigy album. So Colin has picked an album for us to listen to, and without really much research, we've listened to it and made notes, and yeah, we just kind of let the discussion flow from there. It was a bit exciting. My brain was all over the place because it threw all the threw the formulaic nature of the podcast out the window. But yeah, so you can see my brain start to get frazzled during the conversation. But it was an interesting experiment, and potentially one we might try again. Yeah, so yeah, if this kind of thing you like, then please let me know. If not, just yell at me going, Matt, we like the old way, stop, we fear change, etc, etc. And you can do that by emailing me at pickadisc@gmail.com or contacting us on Facebook, Instagram, or what used to be Twitter is now X at pickadisc. I'm also on Threads as well, and I quite like Threads actually. I might start using that more, although the switching between different accounts is a bit different at the moment. So you can find me on my personal account, which is X and Matt on Threads, and yeah, and I'll probably be talking about the podcast there as well. Now I've rabbited on a bit too long for this, but yeah, it's because Twitter's changed its name. It's distracted me, and the formulaic nature has made me rabble on a bit longer than I perhaps should do. So I'm going to stop talking and then let the episode unfold as normal while I chat to Mark about Ciao Baby. There's a mix of excitement, nervousness, in the preceding moments as we start this episode. Future Matt has probably rabbled on about how this is going to be slightly different to normal episodes, and how it might be slightly balmy to have done, or I don't know what future me is going to think about this by the time we finish, but I'm not alone. I've got someone equally as balmy back again to expect with this like experimental of an episode that we'll reveal in a second. Mark Adams, how you doing, Mark?
Hello. It took like 2 years for me to get back on, and now I've been on in like 2 months, but I'm the kind of idiot that will say yes to weird shit, and you offered me some weird shit, so I'm here.
Yeah, you're like a buzz. Like, you wait ages for a Mark, and then two come along at once. Well, the same,
right?
But this is a slightly different episode than usual because the usual spiel of what usually happens, and I can feel my muscle memory kicking in at certain times. So and I could feel myself starting to ask the usual questions which won't apply on this. So I apologise in advance if I suddenly go, why have you picked this? But so we are here, episode 119. We are for Pick a Disc, but the difference being is that myself and the guest haven't picked the disc. There's a third party involved.
We've had our disc picked.
Yeah. We had that disc really truly picked today, yes. So but yeah, no, this came about because I think because you offered to say, oh, do you want me to come on and do a map pick if you're like, because
that was right.
Yeah, because I pretty much did a bunch of episodes a couple of months ago, ahead of time, and me being me, so you realise, shit, there's episodes coming up and I've got no space, and I think Mark kind of jumped in the breach saying, do you want to do a kind of map pick and stuff, but map picks are usually on the multiples of 10, and I've already got the next episode kind of scheduled already, and I'm like, I don't really want to do one out of order and stuff, and then I thought, and you'd been on just quite recently, and I didn't want to suddenly have you back on just to do a conventional episode, and I was like, oh, I had an idea. What if you had somebody else pick the disc and kind of do not necessarily a blind react, but have a listen with like no knowledge going in, and then kind of see where the conversation goes. And he was kind of like really up for this and stuff. And yeah, and we're like,
I'd like to try something new. And
yeah,
is this a soft pilot for a Pick a Disc spin-off?
I don't want another podcast. I don't want another podcast to do. But no, but I mean, I've always said that there's a flexibility to Pick a Disc that's never really been embraced as much. I think it's quite easy to slip into the same formulaic roles and stuff, and 99 times out of 100, because, oh, why have you picked this disc? Because, oh, I really, really like it. And
have you ever actually had anyone say, I've picked a disc I don't like, so I can come and bitch?
No, not yet. No one's goes, oh, so why have you picked this disc? Well, I wanted to come on and basically, I'm not a fan of it, but I know that you really hate this genre of music and I wanted to see you suffer. No one's done that yet. And I'm surprised that the person we've got to pick hasn't done that yet.
I mean, I am that contrary as well.
Yeah. But then again, though, I've always said that I find people will probably find more to talk about stuff that they like rather than stuff they dislike, because people have picked albums that this I didn't realise it was going to get so reflective on the podcast as a whole, but I'm quite enjoying this at the moment. I'm quite enjoying where this is going at the moment. Where I think people have picked the discs, and I can't see people being kind of really keen and having that much kind of connection to an album that they dislike to talk for it for an hour rather than kind of just shit on it. And my kind of philosophy as well is that I don't really see this as being a very kind of negative podcast. There's only been there's not been many albums that have been picked that I've kind of disliked or been negative towards.
It's kind of a journey of discovery for you in general, so it's not that different for you this episode, but for me, I know the Pick a Disc format, and I know I've only been on twice, but it was like I was on a different podcast.
Yeah.
Because obviously without the advantage of picking something that I know well, it's a completely different experience. And I think going back to what you were saying about picking discs that you like, there's also an element of, for me, I would have liked to have picked something more modern the second time around, but all the modern stuff I like doesn't tend to have lyrics. And I felt like without lyrics, that would reduce how much we'd got to talk about. And so, yeah, the standard Pick a Disc... The standard Pick a... Fuck me.
That is staying in.
The standard Pick a Disc... the standard Pick a Disc format is kind of like almost has to have certain things, whereas we've just thrown it all out. We've just thrown it all out of the window. Yeah,
but I mean, there's been a couple of times where the kind of conventional kind of format's been kind of played with. I think, for example, episode 25, I did an experiment that I've not since repeated, because where I basically voted on Twitter for someone to pick out of 4 options, and I was basically listening to it and reacting to it as I was listening to it, with the idea being, like riff tracks or Mystery Science Theater 3000. Basically, you could play the episode over the album. Okay. And you get me kind of like director's commentary, but me being me rather than Rob Brydon being is it Frank Delane? I can't remember. Rob Delane? I can't remember.
Oh, I don't know. I've only watched the old ones.
Classic Delane, Dog in a Bucket, classic Delane. But yeah, there's that. There's the couple of times we've had playlists. So there's the Christmas playlist, and then we had Helena who did the love song playlist on the episode that landed on Valentine's Day.
That's kind of nice.
Yeah, there's and I think there was the episode I did with Kate from Passing Notes, where we basically went through the Metallica blacklist, like 5-hour blacklisting, and we kind of picked our own songs and stuff. And yeah, so there's always there's an innate kind of like flexibility to the format, which I never really embraced as much, and kind of makes it exciting. But then again, like, it's nice to kind of like deviate for a bit. And and so this is what this is. So what we're going to do now is that we've got our kind of third party, who is Colin. He of many different appearances on this. I think he still holds the record for the most guest appearances. I think
and this counts 6. As well, so that's added to it.
Yeah, so it's like 6 6.5 or yeah. So he's here in spirit, but we don't know why he's picked it. I don't know why he's picked it. We've got a rough idea because he was kind of like, when we kind of put the idea to him and he leapt at it because he was like, who can we get to do it? And immediately we both thought the same person. Yeah, it's like, if there's anyone who'd jump at the chance and probably knows as much about music.
And I think what's interesting is that Colin did probably have quite a tough gig here to pick a disc that he thought that both you and I would like. It's not that I dislike any of your main tastes, but my main tastes are very different to yours. And I think, I don't know what you think of this album, but if he's done a good job, he's picked one that both of us have really loved. And I think that's a massive challenge. And who else could have done that for you and me?
Yeah, and I think knowing Colin as well, he probably, one of the reasons I think we mentioned him is that he probably loved the challenge as well. And from the chat he was doing, he was kind of like, ooh, yes, and immediately was kind of like, said he had ideas and his thought processes. So he sent us like a 3-minute audio introduction. So we've not listened to it. So we're going to go blind. So we're going pretty much listening to this for the first time. I'm going to edit this in. So you will hear Colin in a second. So we don't really know anything about the band that he's picked or anything about the band. So we've listened to the album, so we know what he's going to pick, but we've not mentioned it because I've only listened to like the first 15 seconds of it just to make sure he does reveal what we're talking about, and he does. So what's going to happen now is you're going to be hearing Colin, and so we'll see you after the play.
Hey guys, it's Colin Jackson-Brown from Free With This Month's Issue and Weirdig Music Podcasts, and also well known as being the talented one on the Shipwrecked and Comatose podcast with you two. The album that I have chosen for you guys to listen to and report back on in a Pick a Disc Siley is Ciao Baby by theStart. theStart are a band I've been into their entire career. They're a band that formed from the ashes of various 90s nu metal bands. The vocalist Amy Echo was the singer in Human Waste Project, who are one of my absolute favourite bands of the 90s. They only ever released one album before splitting up, basically when the record label dropped them after not promoting them at all. Then Amy Echo's boyfriend at the time, now husband, Jamie Miller, who was the drummer in Snot, who were also an amazing, very sort of punky nu metal band, who sadly split up when their vocalist Lynn Strait was killed in a car crash. They were obviously a couple and decided to start writing music together. They were originally a band called Hero and changed the band to theStart not long after that. Their first album, Shakedown, was released in 2001, which I absolutely would have chosen if it was available anywhere to listen to. It's not on Spotify, and most of the tracks aren't on YouTube. There's bits here and there. I've got it on CD. It's amazing, totally worth tracking down. After that, they got signed to Epitaph Records and put out a much more guitar-based album called Initiation. Other than that, there were a few EPs that are really good as well. But this is their third and to date final album at the moment, which was released in 2007, which is called Ciao Baby. The only band members on the recording, I believe, are Amy and Jamie. Jamie's doing all of the music and Amy's doing all of the vocals. The reason I chose it for you guys to talk about was I was trying to think of an album that I love, that I want to introduce to more people, but also that I think would appeal to you guys. It's got, obviously, the female-fronted pop influence that would appeal to Matt, but also they're coming from a sort of goth and metal background, which will appeal to Mark. So I was kind of hoping that the mixture of the two would collide into something that both of you would dig. If not, then you're both cunts. I love this record, it's great. My favourite track on there, Just a Fantasy's great, but I think overall Dance Revolution is my favourite track on there. I love the synth sounds on it, I love the melodies. It's an album that I love. When they toured this record, I went to see them at least 2 or 3 times. Sadly, they've not been over since 2007 when this was released. They have, however, done a couple of shows in their hometown in LA, and they did release a 7-inch double A-side single in 2017, 10 years after this album came out. There have been hints that they may be working on new material, but these days Jamie Miller is the drummer for Bad Religion, the legendary punk band, so he's very busy touring with them. He's also toured with quite a few other bands. He was a member of Annual Nose by the Trail of Dead for a bit. He was also the drummer for Berlin, who did Take My Breath Away. And Amy is a really successful yoga instructor these days, so that's what they mainly do, but hopefully there will be another album in the future. Really hope that they come back to the UK at some point. So yeah, hope you enjoy it.
And that was Colin, making me have to put the flipping parental advisory explicit tag on there.
Mate, you were always going to have to put the explicit tab on. It's me on as your guest. Fuck. There you go. You'd have had to done it anyway.
A man can dream. But yeah, so I did context of why he picked it, and so that was the first time that we listened to it, and to listen to that. So I kind of liked that. So I think so. Yeah. So Colin's not here. So he's going to be listening to this afterwards. So
were you into 90s new metal?
Not really.
I was, but I haven't heard of Human Waste Project or Snot.
No, see, Human Waste Project I've not heard of, but then again, immediately my mind went to Airborne Toxic Event, which I'm pretty sure was a band, I think, but I know the name. But no, yeah, I've not heard of Human Waste Project or Snot at all. No. But, and as by the Trail of Dead I have heard of. Bad Religion, well,
yes.
Yeah, Bad Religion was actually chosen by another one of our Shipwrecked and Comatose guests for this podcast. So Carl picked. Okay. I can't remember the album title off my head, but it was definitely, I think it was from '94.
Another band I never got into. Probably should have done. They were very much on the kind of wavelength I should have been following, but I never did.
Yeah, but yeah, no, this. Quite interesting, like saying that they kind of technically still apparently are still active, but haven't been for about 16 years. So
because she's a good yoga teacher.
Yeah,
I mean, I think he had a tough job, like you said, female-fronted pop for you and gothy metal for me. But I also think I think he's underplayed it there really, because he's managed to find the more synthy 80s influenced kind of stuff that I've got into more recently, like Dance with the Dead, The Birthday Massacre, and a few other bands like that. I'm going to see Solar Fake in a couple of weeks. And that is a tough gig because my taste has become fucking odd. And, and as far as I'm concerned, I think it's a great album. I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, well, when I first listened to it, my first thought was, if this was 2007, how the flipping heck did I not hear this band or discover them back in 2007? Because as I first listened to it, there was a younger me, like a 21, 22-year-old me, jumping up and down excitedly listening to this, because this is exactly the kind of stuff that I was really into at the time. So it was kind of more like, yeah, so mid to late noughties, I've not really had a chance to kind of delve too much into this, because none of the map picks have crossed over yet, but pretty much what I've often kind of alluded to my indie synth phase, where I was listening to a lot of kind of Scandinavian kind of indie bands with a lot of synthy rock kind of element to it. Stuff like The Sounds, Briscoe, heading towards kind of Central Europe for a second. There was a band called Krezip, which I kind of like got there's one album from a Dutch band called Krezip already got into, but stemming, I think kind of stemmed from when I saw a band called Surfer Rosa support the Killers in like 2004, and I just kind of like ended up discovering Pandora when Pandora worked in the UK for a split second, and then discovered the Sounds.
I love Pandora. So I kind of had I always joked that my music taste retired in 2003 because that's when I actively stopped looking for new music. And whilst I did still go to Glastonbury till 2008, it just kind of didn't matter as much to me anymore. There were other things in my life that were more important than music and discovering new music. But I had quite cool taste in the late 90s to early thousands. So around 2007, this would definitely have been something that I would have missed because I was not really into music. But Pandora, I think it was around this time when we could actually access Pandora, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Around 2007. And I had a little bit of a renaissance and got into weird Finnish metal. And then dipped back out again and my music taste officially retired. But the last couple of years, I've been getting really into the synthwave stuff that I was talking about. And I feel like I almost have a music taste again. And it's weird. And it's both weird having it and also weird as a taste. And so the fact that he's found something from 2007 that appeals to me now, that I wish I'd found in 2007, is actually pretty impressive.
I think he's got good. I think he's done well here, and he's not going to hate me for slagging it off because
we're not cunts.
Yeah, this was kind of my jam, and I've got 3 software that I never open now with all my MP3s in, and I've just done an auto kind of search for every song that's been tagged as 2007, just to get an idea of. And I'm just having a quick look now of the albums that I've got here, which kind of like act as kind of like a crossover, or at least kind of any like basically alerts for basically people listening to this going, you like those bands and you've never heard of the fucking Start, Matt? What the flipping heck? Because so I'm just going through now, and there's still immediately I'm just seeing a bunch of rap music that I haven't listened to in ages, like Millionaire and the Bad Thugs and Army album. But then we jump stuff like Data Rock, who I think are Finnish, kind of like indie, kind of like almost techno-y, grungy stuff. And then also a band that I was going to bring up because this album reminded me so much of them. Have you ever heard of Dragonette? Dragonette,
no.
As in like Dragon E-double-T-E. Yeah, Canadian kind of band front of, again, kind of female pop, kind of pop rocky vocalists, kind of very sensual, very kind of open, very kind of like sex positive album. The first song is
Sounds
called
like
I Get
my
Around.
Jam.
But it's a great album. Second album is really good as well. They've got there's a fantastic song on the second album called "We Live in the City," which is just like one of my favourite kind of pop rock songs ever. But around the same time, Go Team, which there's a bit of crossover with Go Team, but not noisy or sampley. A band called Matinee Club, who was formerly known as The Modern, and who pretty much also remind me a lot of this, but they've also kind of got a male vocalist in the mix who it's very much at the time very kind of Human League-y, because I remember being kind of this is a point where I kind of really got into kind of the Human League, and I was re-listening to Dare and the Best of Human League for ages, so I was kind of like looking for stuff very similar to that, and I can which kind of led me towards the more kind of synthy pop stuff as well. A band called Melody Club, who were, I think, Swedish. They
probably still are Swedish, even if they're not together anymore.
Possibly, yeah. We Are Performance, which is one of my top tier albums of all time, which will definitely be in Matt Pick at one point. Trip the Light Fantastic by Sophie Ellis-Bextor, which, you know what?
Nothing wrong with a bit of Sophie Ellis-Bextor, mate.
I'm trying to think whether that album's... I still prefer the previous one, Shoot From the Hip, which is a lot more kind of 80s-ish, but I'm trying to think whether there's kind of crossover with this there as well. But To My Boy, which I think technically, which I could actually say is my third favourite album of all time after Los Gambusinos and The Killers, which is very much kind of like very kind of distorted synth, kind of like rock stuff. Yeah, so... Yeah, and earlier around the time as well, there's Sahara Hot Nights. Oh god, what they're called? Oh crap, I forgot what they're called. Those Dancing Days. Surf Rosa, The Sounds, like Dying to Say This to You by The Sounds is one of my favourite albums of all time. Actually, that's probably my fourth favourite. Actually, yeah, because that's still in the kind of area that I can rank my top tier albums. Once I get to about 5 or 6, that's when I start getting kind of iffy. But yeah, but those albums and those bands were very much of a similar ilk to this. And definitely, yeah, I say Galore by Dragonette. If you like this, you will love Dragonette.
So I've just looked it up, and around this time it was Pandora, because I got into stuff like Lordi when they won Eurovision. Mm-hmm. Weird, mostly Finnish but Scandi and Eastern European metal and rock stuff. So I was listening to stuff like The Covenant, Thunderstone, Dope Stars Inc. was another one. Neuromancer, but like really kind of electro-gothy stuff. So whilst this is a bit more chill than that, this would have definitely been something that would have worked for me at the time as well. And I missed it too. So again, what Colin's done is he's picked something that hits on what you were listening to at the time. Also what I was listening to at the time, but we were kind of quite a distance away from each other. And this is something that would have appealed to both of us.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things he did say was that, or allude to anyway, was that this was a more of a poppier sound than perhaps their previous album. So,
did you listen to their previous album?
No, I deliberately didn't.
I had a couple of goes on Initiation, which is the one that's on Spotify. Obviously, I didn't know it existed, so I didn't listen to the one that Colin talked about that was their debut album. I assumed that Initiation was their debut album. And it is much heavier, less electronic, and I thought it was okay, but it's not as unique and it's not as cool, and I didn't like it as much as I liked Ciao Baby. But if you like rock music, metal, it's worth a listen. It's all right.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. And immediately, as I said before, I was about to start to jump to the Hall of Fame question, because immediately my brain had suddenly gone to the section where I say, "Oh, what other albums you want to listen to and stuff?" So
maybe we could try and agree between us which one we put in the Hall of Fame after we've had a proper discussion about the album.
You know what? I completely forgot about the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I think you and I need to kind of have a negotiation at the end to Hall of Fame a track. I know. So for me, it was consistently good. With one, I mean, I thought the poorest track on the album was the title track. Actually, I thought Ciao Baby was it was okay on an exceptional album. It wasn't a bad track, but it certainly wasn't the best. And Colin's favourite is also one of my least favourites as well. Dance Revolution. I do like the dirty drum machine, but it's just slower than the rest of the album.
I think particularly the very 2007ness of it. You've got. I think you kind of have to kind of like peaks and troughs, or and kind of like ride the tempo of the album, and so you're not going to constantly just have the same thing the whole time. You need to kind of incorporate some kind of variation, or reach a moment where the listener has to kind of like either take a break, not take a break, but you just want them to engage in it, or kind of refocus their listening. So, because it's not, and I really like the album, but it's not something that's like a full-on rocket ride for me throughout A to B, but like it kind of has that kind of dance revolution to kind of indicate that you kind of reached a kind of milestone or a point in the album where, like, it's like a marker type thing, so that you know, like, you're at a certain point on the journey of this album. So Dance Revolution is brought in to bring that kind of slower, kind of more, kind of almost introspective guitar sound to it.
Oh, I get it, and I don't think it's a bad track. Ciao Baby and Dance Revolution were my two least favourites, but they're still good. And I don't think... No, they're not tracks I'd skip. No, they're not tracks I'd skip. And again, I think Surrender is also only okay, which is the second to last track, so maybe I might just play it up to fix and then play something else. But probably not, because when you press play on Spotify now, it then just carries on, doesn't it? So I probably wouldn't bother.
Yeah.
I certainly don't think they're so skippable that I would be bothered, perhaps. Did you have a favourite track?
I quite like, and I'm just going to double check, see where's the, because I'm curious to have a look on, because I've got a playlist. So, the one I really liked was Runaway, which is the second.
Yeah, so for Runaway, my notes just read fast-paced puppy goodness, bit like No Doubt, but not quite.
Yeah, but I think what quite likes is that there's a bit of variation from the kind of thing I was perhaps expecting. Because I was kind of again expecting completely something very similar to what I've heard. But what I quite liked about this was like there's like a more of a, and knowing that they've come from a new metal background, there's kind of like guitar solos in that perhaps aren't really as prominent, or perhaps are just more incorporated into the mix as part of like the harmony or the backing music to the lead singer in other kind of indie pop synthy albums of this kind of ilk. There's not, so yeah. So the kind of guitar has these kind of like not kind of anthemic rock to it. They've got that kind of, I don't know what the terminology is, that kind of almost whine or screechy noise to it, which like is very much almost like new metalish kind of traces to it. So it's not. Yeah.
I mean, I think, right, so my first impression when it started with the Wartime track was I fucking hate a fade in. Right. I thought she hadn't played, so I pressed play again and paused it. That pissed me off. And I was like, right, Colin, you dickhead. What's wrong with this? Fucking fade in for the first track. Yeah, I want something that just punches you as the first track.
Yeah.
And it did after 33 seconds of fade in. When it kicked in, Wartime is a fantastic song. Mm-hmm. And it just gave me these electro-pop vibes with quite a lot of heavy, like you said, some heaviness behind it. And it really worked for me for the very start. And that track got me excited for the rest. And then Runaway was a great track as well. Followed by, I think, what is my favourite on the album, Just a Fantasy. Again, got another fucking fade in. Ignoring the fade in. I just love the drop. It kind of made me feel a bit Shakespeare's sistery. And were you as nerdy as me when you were into Buffy? Did you research the bands that played the Angel theme?
Yeah, it's not too much now, but
they were called Darling Violetta, and I basically downloaded everything I fucking could off Napster by Darling Violetta. And that's how long ago it is, fucking Napster. And Darling Violetta were not quite as stringsy as you might think from the Angel theme. And they did have a lead singer, which obviously they didn't have for the Angel theme. There was a version of the Angel track that had her singing on it.
Yeah, Sanctuary, yeah.
Yeah, Sanctuary, you're right. Yeah. And at points when, but not always, she reminded me of the vocalist from Darling Violetta as well, but particularly in Just a Fantasy, which worked for me because whilst it was out of my usual comfort zone, I got quite into Darling Violetta for a short period of time.
It's interesting you bring them up because I think, like, on the fans also like on the Spotify page.
Oh, I haven't looked at that. I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah, I had a quick look. I think I had a quick look like about 5 minutes before you turned up. And then I was like, does this count as research? But, you know, I can't know at that point. There was only 2 names that I recognised from the list. Veruca Salt, which I've only started getting into.
I like Veruca Salt.
And I've just, is it Louise Post, I think her name is? One of them has released a solo album this year. Which I've only just listened to, which I really quite like. There's this lead single that he had called Guilty, which is fucking amazing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's currently on like one of, according to Last.fm, Guilty is one of my most played songs of this year. That isn't part of the Maisie Peters album. But the other band that I recognise from this is Darling Violetta.
Okay, so at least I'm not completely bonkers by thinking that she sounds like the singer from... Only in parts and not all that often, but a couple of times I was like, ooh, bit Darling Violetta, but she also reminded me of Gwen Stefani at points as well, which I think I've already mentioned. So, two singers that I like, good.
Just a Fantasy, I think, is the song that reminded me of Dragonet. Dragonet. Yeah, and I really kind of want to listen. I kind of want to listen to Dragonet now. Talking about them.
From what you've said, I'm going to give Dragonet a go as well. You
Yeah,
probably shouldn't give like Thunderstone and The Covenant and Euromancer a go because they're a bit. I still love them, and I'd absolutely go and see them if they toured this country. But I think they're an acquired taste.
You say that I remember actually. I think it was Kazaa, or it might have been BitTorrent at the time, where I started to try and find Lordi albums, and I can't remember much about them. But the only other song from Lordi that sticks in my head is "Devil Is a Loser."
The devil is a loser and he's my bitch.
Yeah, that's the only other Lordi song I can remember. But I do remember actually listening to a bunch of their albums and stuff, and kind of, I think the kind of gimmick kind of wore off for me a bit. So I kind of stuck to a few songs.
Around this time, actually, because they toured after Eurovision, I saw Lordi supported by Turisas. Have you heard of Turisas?
No.
They describe their music as battle metal. So it's kind of like traditional accordions with fucking heavy metal behind it. It's great. Oh, then they dress like kind of like Viking warriors, and it's all so beautifully gimmicky. And nothing like this album whatsoever, so I don't know why we're talking about it.
but now say I think just Fantasy was like one of the songs kind of like clicks on and goes, yeah, this is reminding me of stuff I listened to in my early to mid 20s. Yeah, and I think that then leads into Blood on My Hands, which kind of like darker. I've got it playing very quietly in the background as we're talking at the moment, and I'm still trying to figure out who it reminds me of. And
I tell you what, though, sticking with the Darling Violetta chat, I could see quite a number of these tracks being kind of like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I mean, I know it's post by a couple of years when Buffy finished, but I could see these tracks. Do you remember, what was it called? I Quit by someone or other.
Hepburn, I Quit.
Hepburn. I could see this being a kind of linked to Buffy kind of music, whereas their previous album we talked about, Initiation, was too heavy. But some of the stuff on this definitely could fit that vibe.
The bronze vibe, yeah. I kind of get that. So yeah, there's a bit of that bronzy kind of alternative, kind of pop rock. The kind of soundtrack, the Buffy album, which I loved when I was much younger. And you can actually listen to me talk about it on the Soundtrack Your Life podcast, where I talked about, where I spoke to previous guest Ryan Pack, who I did the Streets first album with on this one. So I spoke on this podcast, which as I'm saying that, I've got this image of, I remember seeing a very spoof like TikTok video of someone basically taking the piss out of podcasts where they'll just spend talking about what other podcasts they've been on. And yeah, I just realised how much I sound like that now. So anyway.
I mean, that's okay.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
But also, Original Pirate Material is a fucking superb album.
True. I still think Grand Duncan Free is a bit better, but
Nah. It's not got the rawness of Original Pirate Material so another example is I tend to like debut albums and feel like a lot of bands, if they lose their kind of rawness, it's not for me anymore. Silverchair, it is, if you take a step back, you look at Frog Stomp, incredible debut. You look at Electric Ballroom, it is a band that has matured as they've worked, and it is a stylistically better album. But fucking Frog Stomp is so good. I can't really explain why, it just works better for me. You listen to the lyrics of Frog Stomp, it sounds like it was written by a 14-year-old because it was written by a 14-year-old, but it's still a better album than when they're a grown-up doing Electric Ballroom. And that's how I felt with The Streets as he progressed and essentially became richer. He lost some of the rawness that Original Pirate Material was so unique for. And why are we talking about albums that aren't this album? We both like music.
No, tangents, but
sorry.
But then again, though, what's interesting when you say about that is you've listened to Initiation, Initiation was the album before this, or you've listened to select tracks from it.
And I've contradicted myself. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I was going to say, isn't that slightly raw? This is more polished and.
It is, but it's more along the vibes with the electronically influenced synthy, metally, but not too heavy. Yes, I get what you're saying, and maybe if I'd encountered them in order, maybe I'd have changed my opinion. But because Ciao Baby was what was given to me, and it was very similar to my current taste, I think that's why that hasn't followed here, perhaps.
Yeah, and I'm just venturing onto the Wikipedia page for the first time. So...
Right, you're better at this than me. While you're doing that, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you think there were some tracks that used a drum machine and some tracks that used drums?
Yes, I wouldn't say I'm better at this. I'm crap at... I'm also quite crap at this. But I think there is a mixture of the two. So, for example, now, because I'm playing Millionaire as we're talking, and that sounds like it could be a drum machine.
I would say in particular Fix was like a drum machine, and that's because it reminded me of Nine Inch Nails to some extent, the beat. And obviously Nine Inch Nails live, he has his own live drummer, but everything on a Nine Inch Nails album is produced electronically by Trent Reznor. And so that really felt, at that point I was like, that's a drum machine. So I went back and listened to the album again. I was like, I'm not sure it's all a drum machine though, but I'm certain it's a drum machine on Fix.
I think Millionaire's definitely a thing. I had a quick look on Fix as well. I've just put Runaway on, and Runaway is definitely that's gotta be a live drum kit.
Well, there you go. You've answered the question. That's what I genuinely didn't know, because I was absolutely certain that Fix was a drum machine, but I wasn't about the rest of the album. And that's interesting that they've chosen to do it in two different ways. It says a lot about who they are as musicians and how experimental, and yeah, that's cool, that.
Because I think because Colin mentioned there was on Epitaph, but for their first album was actually in Geffen, which I don't know which was owned by Interscope and Polydor and stuff, so it's... but then the second album, Initiation, was on Nitro Records.
Yeah.
Being an incubator for punk rock artists who subsequently became successful. Lasted 1994 to 2007. AFI was on there. I love
AFI. I haven't listened to them in years.
Yeah, and they've done... Yeah, but the start was on there. But the founder of that label was Dexter Holland from The Offspring.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then the third album, so this album was released on Metropolis, which it's a very, very, very small Wikipedia article. Like it's about 2
Right. Yeah. I mean, they haven't released anything since 2007, really, so you can see why it's not got a huge... Although the number of listens on Spotify is big, considering they haven't released anything since 2007.
True. I mean, 1,400 listeners, and I mean the album's in like tracks have only got like about 5 figures, but then again that is that's usually my level of stuff that I listen to anyway. But then again, I like they've got quite a big roster on their basically the link of artists that have released stuff on Metropolis Records include bands like The Birthday Massacre.
I guess The Offspring.
Birthday Massacre.
I love The Birthday Massacre.
That's why I mentioned them.
They're bloody brilliant. I was so close to doing a Birthday Massacre album with you instead of Construction for the Modern Idiot.
Yeah, so looks like the majority of the Birthday Massacre albums they've released have been on the same record label as The Start. So
amazing.
Covenant.
Brilliant. What are the chances?
Swedish electronic band formed in Helsingborg in 1988, also on the same.
I'm wearing an Icebreaker t-shirt. You'll be saying their name next.
No, I've not seen them.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
I'm just reading through. I don't recognise the majority of these names when I come thinking about it. Frontline Assembly is a name I vaguely remember. God Module, I remember them for some reason. Angel Spit I only know because they're a band that I only know one song from them, which is like a full-on metal weird song about an evil surgeon murdering people but cutting people's hearts out. And
nice.
it's very unlathamy, but for some reason I like that song.
That is a good word, unlathamy.
Yeah, Alison Moyet.
Oh, bloody love Alison Moyet. I got drunk at Manchester Pride when I went to see Alison Moyet and I cried.
Gary Newman apparently has released stuff on...
Oh, what albums?
This one?
It's 90s goth shit.
Let me have a quick look.
Jagged? That's a fantastic album.
We passed 93. No, I can't see anything on Metropolis. No, I can't. No, it's just got his name on there for reasons I don't know. It's a band called Snog.
Snog?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Still going, apparently. Experimental EBM, IDM, industrial, electro-industrial, anti-folk. I've got no idea what they are.
That sounds good.
Like the name. Yeah, I don't recognise the majority of the names on here, apart from the odd two or three I mentioned. But yeah, so they've got quite a bit of. So it sounds like the record label is deserving of a much longer Wikipedia article than perhaps they should do. But so I can. But interesting. But I think it's interesting that like the band you say, oh yeah, Covenant's not like this, but on the same record label.
Yeah, it's mad that, isn't it?
Yeah, but
and the Birthday Massacre. You wouldn't have heard of either of those bands if it wasn't for me.
Yeah,
Birthday Massacre. Have you actually listened to any Birthday Massacre?
No, but didn't you say it was one of your albums of the year for one of the pick discs?
Yeah, I
things.
Did.
That was.
I kind of cheated and named like about 6 albums on that, but you know.
Was that last year? Was it 2000? Was that last year? Fascination so, Fascination was the one. 20. Yeah. But I think with the start, I think it's kind of weird because part of me's feeling like we haven't spoken about it as much as we should do. But then again, though, we don't have. Again, going back to kind of the nature of this episode and going against what this show has been so far, there's no real personal connections we've had with the actual album itself to kind of delve into.
I found the most personal connections in this particular instance was kind of picking out what each track reminded me of. Like,
yeah,
we've talked about the Birthday Massacre, Blood on My Hands. Did feel like a Birthday Massacre track to begin with. It changed once it kicked in, but the first few bars felt like a Birthday Massacre track, and similarly later on, it was almost a U2 riff in Master Plan. And I enjoyed thinking about what it reminded me of and engaging with that a lot, and I think my notes reflect that, because I've mentioned loads and loads of bands, which I didn't do when I was bringing my own disc to the show.
Ladytron, that's it.
Bloody love Ladytron.
Yeah, yeah, that's what Blood on My Hands remind me of. Ladytron.
I can see that. Yeah, okay, I'll give you that.
Yeah, I'm not listening to that album much because I think I only listened to it for about a couple of times at the start of this year, but they released an album this year.
Right.
Times Arrow, which
I didn't know that Ladytron had got a new album. I'm going to have to give that a go.
Yeah, it was released in January. It was one of the first albums that I listened to. It was one of the first albums that's on my kind of 2023 list, I think. Just to check that.
Ooh. Spotify's been good for telling me about new album releases in the last year or so, but it didn't tell me about that one. Boo, Spotify.
Yeah, Ladytron. Yeah, it was definitely this year. I was going to get confused. Hoping I wasn't getting confused again. Times Are Out 2003. Yeah, so their new album as well. Yeah, so because I think it was what's that? It's the album with Evil on. I can't remember which one it was. That's the one song I can remember from that period. I can't remember which from that, but yeah, there's pretty much. But as you're saying, it kind of reminded me of a bunch of stuff that I remember kind of listening to, and that like eventually going onto MySpace. Onto MySpace, like into the late 2000s. And
if we're going to talk about MySpace, now's the time to admit what your track was on your MySpace profile. Mine is shameful.
I don't know what I left it as, but I do remember, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast for ages. It was "Turn It Up" by Robots in Disguise. Not
a track I know, but I'm going to have a listen.
Robots in Disguise. It's not 2007, but it was a Matt Pick. It was a Matt Pick album. But yeah, also Robots in Disguise, kind of tangibly very similar. Well, perhaps not as poppy, but yeah, they're very much kind of distorted, kind of indie, very synthy. Like there's a lot of distortion of vocals. I think the two they dated. One of them dated Noel Fielding for years. So Noel Fielding appears in the videos of that for like a good 2 or 3 of their albums, and I'm pretty sure they appeared on the Mighty Boosh, I think, at some point.
Okay, cool.
Robots in Disguise do, yeah. But yeah, so I think I generally can't think of what else to talk about. We got onto the end of
I've got a few more bands that it reminded me of, if you'll indulge me. Millionaire particularly reminded me of Depeche Mode.
Okay.
And that makes me happy because, the track in general is a bit like dirtier and gothier than the rest of the album. And another favourite of mine. And Fix was very, very electronic, which was great for me. And it was kind of like just upbeat fun. And that was the one that we talked about that was clearly a drum machine, which I thought was interesting. But in general, the whole album, there wasn't a weak track. There were tracks that I definitely liked more. Fix, Masterplan, Millionaire, Just a Fantasy, and Wartime. But all the others, I would happily... They're not skip tracks. They're definitely not skip tracks.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think this is an album that I can probably play all the way through. I don't think I could skip it. I don't think I could skip anything. Yeah, I think Runaway, I think Just Fantasy was good. Dance Revolution, I admit I quite liked. Fix and Surrender as well. Blood in My Hands, another one. Wartime, apart from, as I said, the fading, because I'm pretty much not a fan of the fadings either.
No.
But yeah, I think it's just got that kind of nice element to it. I don't think it didn't. I think the lyrics didn't really grip me as perhaps some other bands did at the time. I don't think they're that deep lyrically, admittedly.
No.
I do admit, I think it does. Aside from the fading, I do quite like songs that kick in with like a kind of interesting first line. So like, I've done some very bad things. I have no excuses. I wasn't listening. I think it's like a very a great first line to open up the album. And when that song kicks in, it works as kind of like the introduction stuff. And
yeah.
And I know you perhaps didn't like it as much as others, but I do kind of appreciate the fact that they kept the title track at the very, very end of the album as well.
Yeah, that was an interesting choice. I'm trying to think of any other album that does that.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure there's been 1 or 2 albums
not many
on this. Yeah. I mean, the thing that always the fact that I think's amazing is that the Dexys album we covered, and the name is blanking me. The one with Come On Eileen on it, Turai. Yeah, Come On Eileen is track 9 out of 10 track album.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so but then I think the US version of that album stuck it at the front, changed the running order of it.
Front loaded.
Yeah,
and I don't feel like this album was front loaded. Whilst, yes, I do love Wartime and I do love Just a Fantasy. It just felt consistently good.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, and I think with it, and as I think mentioned as well, the kind of different, the odd flourishes of like weird sound effects and the kind of guitar tones and solos that kick in, knowing now that they come from a new metal background, which perhaps had a bit, well, the metal aspect, because I wouldn't, if you told me this was from people from a metal band, I wouldn't believe you. I couldn't, there's hardly much metal in it.
I hadn't clocked that. I hadn't. And that was, I don't know, that was maybe a surprise. It felt poppier and more 80s and synthy influenced than people with a new metal background.
Yeah, but again, there are those flourishes that kind of are explained with the new metal stuff, which, have you heard Rina Sawayama's first album?
Yes.
Yeah, which is basically someone's MP3 collection from the year 2000, if they all mixed into each other. Like, for example, it's where you got STFU, but then you've got XS, which is basically an R&B pop song when trying to be invaded by System of a Down, with those kind of like crunchy guitars that lead into the chorus and stuff. It's not as explicit and it's not as unsubtle as that with this, but the kind of weird kind of sound effects that I'm like you're half expecting kind of Linkin Park to suddenly.
Yeah, well, I mean that's Rina Sawayama's charm, that she doesn't know what the fuck she wants to do, so she does it all, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's slightly, but I think it's a lot more kind of opaque in terms of what she's doing in terms of influences and stuff. Whereas perhaps not the same kind of vibe, but the incorporation of the new metal elements is a lot more subtle here. I think a couple of, again, Runaways.
I wouldn't call Rina Sawayama subtle, mate. I'm not sure I'd call this subtle either, but I understand what you're getting at when it comes to the subtlety of the influence of new metal.
Yeah, and I think that kind of explains a few of the things. I was like, oh, okay, this is very similar to the sounds, but the sounds that wouldn't have that kind of weird, that kind of like screechy guitar tone to it, in like a guitar solo that happens halfway through, before the second verse kicks in. But yeah, I think I think it's like enough to kind of stand out amongst things and stuff. And
Matt. Do you want to talk about the cover art? Because you never talk about the cover art.
Let's talk about the cover art.
She's kind of hot, right?
I agree so, yeah.
I mean, I was more looking at her fabulous coat, but I would totally wear that coat. And I'll tell you what it reminded me of, with the crap table and the curtain against a wall. It reminded me of every crap wrestling venue that I've worked in, like working men's clubs. But what's that thing on the table? I couldn't work it out. Do you know what that is?
I think that looks like, I'm trying to see if I can find a bigger, a higher quality version of it. It, to me, looks like, you know, the old-fashioned radar.
Oh, damn. Like an 80s kind of... Boop,
boop. I'd say like 40s or 50s or something.
80s telly, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh... Why? Why is she in a working men's club in a fabulous coat with a 40s radar?
And a gun.
Is there a gun? Did I miss the gun?
It's a gun in a left hand.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Oh.
Can you not see the gun?
Right, I'm gonna have another look now. Oh, yeah? There's a gun? I hadn't clocked that. Huh. No, I hadn't clocked that at all. She's got a gun.
She's got a gun.
She has?
There's a very almost like femme fatale inverse, like walking into detective's office, but then like brandishing a weapon.
So why is she in a crap working men's club with an old-fashioned radar machine, a fabulous coat, and a gun? I mean, I guess the answer to that is because she can, but still.
If any of you listening know the answer, please write in.
But I think I do like it. I mean, I don't know why, if they're a two-piece, they're not both in it, though.
I mean, like again, because I'm googling the album art, I'm now getting images of them, what seems to be earlier phases, and they look very, very different. They do look very, very different. So for example, I'm just gonna show you. Can I quickly share my screen, which is going to be great for. Can you see that?
Yeah.
That's them from Spotify.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're
But
wearing.
There's more than 2 of them.
Yeah, there's 4 of them there. But they're wearing black, and she's got like dye black hair with like blonde highlights, kind of. Yeah, so they look a lot more what I assume a new metal band would look like.
True.
There's like new romantics element to them mixed in with. They've got their all music profile that I saw as we was talking earlier. Mentioned stuff like again Depeche Mode or The Cure being influences. There's like all of them have got eye makeup on. They're like they almost kind of like particularly in the. And I'm assuming this was a few years before kind of the surge of like My Chemical Romance and Panic at the Disco,
Yes.
with Guyliner.
Guyliner.
With all the Guyliner that kicks in. But there's like it's interesting that band, the picture that we just saw with the kind of earlier kind of publicity photos kick in. So we have and again, I apologise for everyone who's listening to a podcast, which is an audio medium, and we're talking about stuff that you can't see at the moment. But if you Google the start,
yeah,
Blood on My Hands, which I'm assuming this is the single artwork, which is a lot more kind of like period piecey, where you've got you've got Amy Echo and Jamie Miller, I think, both in there. Like she's kind of got like a cardigan. What is it? Tweed? I don't know what
it's
she's
definitely
wearing.
tweed.
Yeah, like coming off the set of Mad Men, more or less. So it's
but
like
they're
a
still
60s
in that
element.
same blooming terrible working men's club curtain, faded orange.
Yeah, true. And again, I found a picture of the back of the album art, and it's.
Oh, so he's on the back. Okay, so at least he's on the back. That's good. Fair enough.
Like in like a nice black suit, reading the Los Angeles Times. And I think you compare it to the Shakedown album cover, which is
Bad.
not as good. That is a bad
it's
album
not.
cover. That's a bad album cover, actually.
It looks like a local band's attempt at an album cover. To be honest with you.
Yeah, that's what a class of school children would develop the first time they use parts of editing software. But I think the photo shoot for the other one, for this album art's a lot better.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, with the gun that Mark can't see.
I can see it now. But yeah, you're right. I like the album cover, even though I didn't spot the gun. But I think it's a vast improvement over their previous album covers as well. And it's a shame that they didn't carry on past this, because this sound feels like they'd found the sound, something unique that was respectful to their influences. And yeah, it feels a bit like what happened with the Wonder Stuff, which was my last visit to Pick a Disc, was they hit an album that I loved and then stopped.
Yeah, what I think finds quite interesting as well afterwards is that they really haven't done anything since then, apart from something for the kind of 10th anniversary of this. But I think what ended up, that perhaps in order to kind of like live, like he ended up getting kind of like session musician work and joined like Bad Religion and other bands that I think perhaps were slightly more successful than this one.
Right.
Admittedly, I think. Because Bad Religion are probably still going now.
They're huge.
And pretty much like if you tour with them, you're probably able to do some kind of living wage with them alongside the yoga. But
I love that. She just wants to be a yoga teacher. Good for her.
Yeah. So, But I mean, yeah, and I nice to know that Colin has also seen them live as well.
Do you know what? Colin said he'd want to go and see them live. I mean, do you want to go and see them if they tour?
Yeah, definitely.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
We also need to pick the track we're putting in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, we do, which is going to be interesting. So,
I don't think any of my favourites match your favourites, which is fascinating about this album, that they're all clearly very strong tracks. And whilst Colin has managed to find something that hits both of our taste, so I would say
before we continue, let me try and get some semblance of normality in my head for a second. For anyone listening to this for the first time, what this is that I'm going to be asking Mark to pick one song off this album to be immortalised forever on the Hall of Fame Spotify Hall of Fame playlist. I can't veto it, whatever he says goes, blah, 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 blah. I kind of still want to keep that.
okay.
Because I've always said that I don't want input into what goes onto the playlist. I mean,
okay.
I mean, I have got my own hidden playlist of
Do you
songs
do that?
Yeah, I've got my own playlist of songs I've picked, which at some point I will reveal, perhaps one day.
Amazing.
But yeah, and as much as like going to debate what goes on, ultimately, to keep the genesis and the integrity, the quote unquote integrity of the playlist.
So my favourite tracks were Wartime, Just a Fantasy, Millionaire, and Fix. And I'm torn between Just a Fantasy and Fix. I'm going to go with Just a Fantasy because of the drop, despite the fact it has a fade in.
So Just the Fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Would that have been the one you'd have put in?
Maybe you'll find out one day.
Ah, tell me off air.
Maybe you'll find out one day.
Oh.
But yeah, so yeah, this is how organised I am. I usually have the spreadsheet, my master spreadsheet of the podcast open. Yeah, and I don't have it open, so that's how much improvisation that we are doing today. Yeah, so Just a Fantasy joins the ever-growing playlist list, which has contained stuff like Blue October, They Might Be Giants, a band called The Wonder Stuff,
Love them,
Alanis Morissette, etc., etc. So yeah, so it becomes not the 119th, but in the chronology of the episodes, the 119th track. So it's probably actually the 117th, I think, song to join the Spotify Playlist Hall of Fame. So, yeah, and because the nature of this episode is my internal clock and structure has been fabricated. I can't remember if there's anything else after this bit. I'm broken. This episode has broken me. My concept of chronology on the way the Pick of this episodes have been broken forever. Just be careful. The next episode I won't be opening up with live stories.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, neither of us are likely to have seen it live, are we?
No, unfortunately not. No, but yeah, Colin said that he's seen him quite a few times on this actual tour.
I know.
So I did a proper tour stalk.
Tour stalk, is that an official term?
No, it's one I've just made up.
Tour stalk's a good one though. I tour stalked Uncle, and when they toured, I went to see them at like 3 different venues out of like 6 or 8, and it was great.
I'm trying to. I've perhaps like twice on the same tour, like perhaps like a week apart. I think Johnny Foreigner I've seen, a week apart. They played Birmingham, and then the week after they would end up in Derby. I am seeing Dead Pony twice in September. I'm seeing him in Nottingham and Birmingham.
So I'm going to see the Wonder Stuff a week on Monday for the Construction for the Modern Idiot 30th anniversary tour. And depending on how much I enjoy it, they've split it into 2. They're going to like take a break and then they're going to do some more gigs towards the end of the year. And if I really, really enjoy it in Liverpool, I'm probably going to go back and see it at Wolverhampton or somewhere else like that. So
Okay.
I might be tour stalking the Wonder Stuff 30 years after the first time I went to see him.
Yeah, I think I'd love to try and tour stalk a few more, but like, yeah, I don't know. It'll have to be places that I can drive to and back, and depending on whereabouts on the weekend, I think. So, like, if someone was playing Bristol and then Birmingham or Nottingham.
Yeah, you don't want to go all the way to Bristol.
That's only about an hour. It's like the same time it takes me to get to Nottingham.
Oh, Bristol's bloody miles away from me.
Yeah, but you're in Manchester.
I know.
I think
Sheffield's dead close for me, actually, and they have a lot of good gigs. If I can't make it a weekend when a band's playing in Manchester, I tend to look and see if Sheffield has got a Wednesday or a Thursday, because that tends to be what happens. If there's a big Manchester gig for a band at the weekends, they'll be in Sheffield on a weekday. So I've done that a few times.
I mean, because you're not far from Liverpool either, so...
No, but that's why I'm going to Liverpool to see the Wonder Stuff, because I couldn't make the Manchester date.
Yeah.
Similarly, I'm going to see the Boulay Brothers in Birmingham, because I can't make the Manchester date.
Yeah, not heard of the Boulay Brothers.
They're a drag act that do a kind of rival show to RuPaul called Dragula, and it's a kind of horror-themed drag contest. And
Okay.
they kind of learnt from RuPaul. What you do is you make music, you put it in a telly show, you sell music.
Works.
Well, I bought a ticket.
But yeah, that is Ciao, baby. And before I say Ciao, baby, to Mark,
I knew you were going to do that.
I couldn't help myself. Where can people find you if they want to find you online?
On Twitter and Instagram, I'm at MarkAdamsHC. My Instagram is vaguely linked to my job as a humanist celebrant, and I almost never use it because I'm terrible. My Twitter is humanist celebrant-y, but also has some wrestling-y stuff on because I'm a wrestling ring announcer, random thoughts, podcast stuff. And my two podcasts are Shipwrecked and Comatose, which are with you for Shipwrecked and Comatose, and Colin as well as our friends Kurt and Carl, who've also been on Pick a Disc. We talk about Red Dwarf on that one, at Red Dwarf Pod on Twitter. My other one is even more niche than that. It is a podcast based around the Chucky and Child's Play franchise. And we talk in a similar way to what we do on Shipwrecked and Comatose. When we're in between series, we have a look at Chucky adjacent stuff. And we've done some fun stuff on that. That's at Chucky Vision on Twitter as well.
Yeah. Also, big thank you to Colin for picking the disc.
I mean, props to Colin to actually find something that we both really, really liked. That boy knows his music, considering how weird we both are and how kind of opposite we are in a lot of ways with our music taste.
I mean, yeah. Part of me was I wouldn't have been surprised if he was going. Part of me was thinking he might have picked something that I was struggling with or out of my comfort zone, out of fascination. But I don't want to say he played it safe. I think he picked something that he probably knew that we both enjoy, even though he had the opportunity to get me to sit through.
Yeah, something shocking.
Yeah.
Are you going to listen to this album again?
I think I might.
Yeah, I am. It's definitely one that I like, and I will listen to it again.
Well, I need to kind of get myself a kind of proper playlist of. I've got like a kind of indie synth playlist that I've got from around this time, different bands. That I'll probably just stick a couple of these songs on.
Yeah.
But it's listen to this. It's kind of like giving me a bit of a niche to kind of to revisit something. So like, I think as this finishes and I'm waiting for the Zoom audio to kind of render, I might stick that Dragon album on.
Yeah, I'm going to listen to some of your stuff from around this period and some of my stuff. I'm definitely going to get me some Thunderstone on. I'm going to try Dragonet and Robots in Disguise. So yeah, I've been inspired by this. So I'm glad we did it.
Get Rid is the Robots in Disguise. It's the second album. I've done a Matt pick on that album as well. Get Rid is the that's the album to check out from them. Look, Colin's podcasts, We Dig Music and Free with this month's issue. You can search for them on your podcast apps. If you're listening to this podcast, so as Colin usually says, you know how to search for them, so you can do your homework for them.
What you do is you type the words in, and then you press enter, and it finds what you're looking for. Same with my podcast too.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, go and check out Colin's as well. He's a good egg.
He is a good egg.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you again, Colin. So that's it. We are now at the end of this kind of interesting experiment and stuff, and I've quite enjoyed it. Might it be interesting to see if it works? To perhaps revisit it. Perhaps not immediately. I might revisit the kind of concept of the external pick for disc for line picking. So I might experiment to that again. Might be a while before I try this again. But but back to normal service. Well, I say it's back to normal service. The next episode's a Matt pick, and and I've already got, and that's with my friend Chris, who's been on twice, I think, before many years ago. So he's going to be interviewing me about an album.
Is that the guy that picked Troublegum My Therapy?
No. This is the guy who picked Trip the Light Fantastic by Sophie Alex Bextor and Full Smiles by Amy Stutt.
Okay.
So which is another, which is coincidentally he picked it, but that's also one of my top tier albums. It's one of the best damn pop albums ever. But you'll find out which album very, very soon. So yeah. That's it, Mark. Thank you very much for coming on.
I've had a nice time. It was fun and it was silly, and you were genuinely discombobulated throughout the whole thing, which amused me.
Very much, yeah. This is like, yeah. So until next time.
Ciao, baby.
You've been listening to Pick a Disc, and I've been your host, Matthew Latham. Our theme music is Pump by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Pick a Disc is hosted by the We Made This podcast network, and you can find them on www.spreaker.com/user/WeMadeThis. You can find the Pick a Disc show site on www.spreaker.com/show/pickadisc. You can find us on all the usual social media type places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can also email us on pickadisc@gmail.com. Until next time, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.
Hello, and this is Chucky Vision on the We Made This Network, the podcast for all things Chucky. I'm Dev Elson.
And I'm Mark Adams. We're two queer podcasters who love bloody horror,
Camp comedy, gay romance,
and referencing icons like Freddy, Jason, and Britney.
The Chucky films and new TV show deliver all of that, and there is still so much more to cover.
So if you want to play, find Chucky Vision on Twitter @ChuckyVision and on all good podcast providers.
And yes, the title is a Chuckle Vision pun.
Because why not?